Evan Carter had lived on the quiet farming outpost of Brindle Mine for so long that silence had become his routine, a steady companion that followed him from sunrise to sunset as he repaired drones, cleaned tools, and listened to the soft hum of machinery that never argued or asked questions. But on this particular evening, the silence broke in a way that made him stop mid-task, his wrench slipping from his hand as a faint shuffle echoed from behind his workshop, as if something small, careful, and unfamiliar had wandered too close. Evan slowly stepped outside, expecting maybe a damaged supply drone or one of the harmless desert creatures that roamed the outskirts, but instead he found two small alien children standing together, trembling slightly, their bright blue skin glowing softly and their eyes wide with hunger and exhaustion. And for a moment, Evan simply stared because he had never seen their species before, not even in trade logs or travel reports, yet their fear was unmistakable and deeply human in its own way. So he lowered himself to their level and spoke gently, asking if they were hurt or lost, though they only nodded without speaking, as if words were either difficult or forbidden. Realizing they needed help more than explanations, Evan brought them inside, offered warm food, and watched as they ate with a desperate gratitude that made him wonder how long they had been wandering the barren terrain. And as they finished, their nervousness slowly softened into curiosity as they touched tools, examined monitors, and pointed at small glowing lights as if they had stepped into a new world. Evan felt an unexpected sense of responsibility forming inside him, a quiet pull that told him these children didn't just stumble across his outpost by accident, that something bigger was unfolding beyond the calm horizon. But for the moment, he focused on keeping them safe, giving them blankets and space to rest while he checked his sensors, only to find strange energy patterns circling the surrounding region, readings he had never seen before, readings too organized and powerful to come from simple travelers. He kept the discovery to himself, not wanting to frighten the children who were now watching him with a trust he wasn't sure he deserved. Yet their presence filled the workshop with a warmth he hadn't felt in years, a warmth that made the empty outpost feel alive again. As night settled deeper over Brindle 9, a soft vibration rolled across the ground, subtle enough that it could have been a distant storm, but when the vibration returned stronger and more controlled, Evan stepped outside and stared into the sky where a faint silver glow began to spread across the dark canvas like a slow-moving tear opening from orbit. He tried to steady his breathing, reminding himself that the outpost rarely received visitors, and when it did, they arrived in standard registered transports, not silent shadows drifting above the atmosphere with impossible precision. He returned to the children who were suddenly alert, their eyes reflecting the strange silver light, and he knew then that they recognized. Whatever was approaching, though, they said nothing, only watched the sky through the workshop window, as if waiting for something they feared and longed for at the same time. Evan felt tension tighten inside his chest, not from danger he could see, but from the unknown that now hovered just beyond the thin air of Brindle 9, and as he stepped outside once more, the silver glow sharpened into shape, a tremendous vessel, sliding silently out of orbit, sleek and smooth like a blade of light, far larger than any civilian craft he had ever witnessed, and utterly unfamiliar to every database he had access to. The ground trembled again, this time in steady pulses that matched the descent of the massive ship, and Evan took a step back, shielding his eyes from the growing brightness, while his heartbeat hammered with a mixture of awe and dread, because ships like this didn't travel without purpose. And they definitely didn't come to isolated farming outposts unless something or someone on the ground mattered greatly. Behind him, the children stood in the doorway, their glowing markings brightening as if reacting to the ship's presence, and with a shock of realization, Evan understood that their arrival at his outpost had not been random at all, that he had stepped into something far beyond his quiet life, something connected directly to the awe-inspiring machine descending from the stars. As the ship neared the surface, its presence swallowed the night, turning the desert floor into a field of shifting silver reflections, and Evan felt a cold wave of uncertainty wash over him because he didn't know who commanded such a vessel, what they wanted, or how the children were involved. Only that the moment the ship touched down, his life would be forever changed, and the ordinary quiet he had lived with for years would never return. The ground vibrated beneath Evan's boots as the gigantic silver starship completed its landing, settling with a soft, controlled pulse that rippled through the dry soil of Brindle 9, and for a moment he stood frozen, unsure whether to run, hide, or remain exactly where he was. But the alien children stepped forward with calm steps that surprised him. As if the arrival of this powerful ship was not a threat but a familiar sight, something they had been expecting long before they reached his small outpost. Evan followed them with hesitant steps, his heart racing, unsure whether this approaching moment would become a blessing or a disaster. And as the ship's lower doors slid open with a quiet hum, a group of tall armored guards marched outward in perfect formation, their armor shimmering like living metal and their movements sharp, synchronized, and strangely graceful, each one carrying a staff that glowed along its edges with controlled energy, reminding Evan that these were not wanderers but elite protectors of something or someone important. The children rushed ahead joyfully, and the guards instantly softened, stepping aside to form a path as a tall figure emerged behind them, a woman with smooth blue skin, intricate markings that glowed like constellations, and an aura of calm authority that seemed to shape the air around her. She walked forward with quiet strength, her presence both warm and commanding, and when she reached Evan, she stopped and studied him with eyes that held galaxies of thought, and though Evan had never met her, he knew instantly she was no ordinary traveler. This was a leader whose influence stretched far beyond the stars he could see. The children ran into her arms with relieved laughter, and she held them close for a moment, whispering softly in a language Evan didn't recognize. Then she turned to him with a gentle nod of gratitude, introducing herself as the Supreme Guardian of the Galaxy, a title that made Evan's breath catch because he could hardly imagine someone with such power standing here on his lonely outpost, speaking to him as if he mattered. She explained that her children had slipped away during a diplomatic visit and gotten caught in a strange atmospheric shift that disoriented them, causing them to wander far from their landing point until they stumbled across his outpost, and she thanked him with sincere warmth for offering them food, shelter, and safety when he could have ignored them or turned them away. Evan felt awkward under the praise, insisting he had only done what anyone with a heart would do, but the Guardian shook her head gently and said that compassion, shown without expectation, was the rarest form of strength in the galaxy, and that he had proven something about humanity she had always hoped was true. The guards around her relaxed as she approached Evan and placed a small, glowing emblem in his hand, a delicate token shaped like a star unfolding into wings, telling him that this symbol would grant him safe passage and respect across worlds under her protection, a gift offered only to those who performed acts of genuine kindness. Evan stared at the emblem, unsure how to respond, feeling a mix of disbelief and humility as the children waved at him with bright smiles, their earlier fear replaced entirely with relief and affection. As they returned to their mother's side, the Guardian promised that his name would be remembered within her people's archives, not as a soldier or scientist, but as a man who chose kindness when no one was watching. And then she stepped back as the guards reformed their protective circle around her and the children, guiding them up the shimmering ramp toward the interior of the vessel. Evan stood in silence as the starship's doors slowly closed, and when the engines activated, they lifted the massive craft with a smooth burst of light that painted the night sky in soft silver waves, before it soared upward and vanished into the stars without a trace of noise or smoke, leaving the desert still and quiet once again. Evan looked down at the emblem resting in his hand, its soft glow pulsing like a heartbeat, and he realized how much his life had changed in a single evening, that he had crossed paths with beings of incredible power, and yet had been treated with respect simply because he chose to help two lost children. He returned to his workshop, still processing everything, but as he stepped inside, his sensors began to flash again, displaying a new signal approaching from beyond the outer ridge, not as large as the Guardian's ship, but fast, purposeful, and heading directly toward his outpost. And Evan felt the familiar ripple of suspense rise inside him, understanding that the universe had decided he was no longer just a quiet mechanic living in isolation, and whatever was coming next would push him into a future far larger than he had ever imagined, a future that was already rushing toward him through the silent night.